Okay, so again, basically this is gonna be your solar analysis requirement more or less for your studio. We're gonna cover the workflow in Revit today. So you guys already had more or less the workflow and workshop shown to you guys for Ladybug in previous workshops by Theodorus and Professor Spiegelhalter. So today I thought it would be good to go through the Revit version of that, which we're gonna be using Insight 360. You guys are free to use whichever workflow you want. If you were to ask me if I was to be doing this assignment again, I would probably use the butterfly tools. Personally, I think it's more flexible, especially since now that you have the Rhino inside of Revit, you kind of have the best of both worlds. So I think for most people, the butterfly tools might be the best option. But I want to show you guys the Revit workflow today. That way you guys can have both in your tool belt depending on what you want to use. So there are some topics in here that even if you are using the butterfly workflow that are going to be important regardless. So one of those things is setting a project to true north. Another concept is maybe working with a project base point versus a project survey point. We're not going to have a survey point because we don't have a site survey, but we're going to treat our GIS data that we did in the first workshop as our reference for our survey point. So we're going to kind of simulate as if we have a survey point. And we'll go over how we can set that up in Revit. So this will be useful regardless of whether you're using Butterfly or Revit. Question in the chat. Yes, it's being recorded.
What did you mention what butterfly was for?
Sorry, did I say butterfly? Butterfly is the wind simulation, I think, for Ladybug tools. I haven't used it yet. But basically this is the Ladybug tools. If you guys remember from the workshop that Theodorus had done. Right? So you have Ladybug, the general tools, Honeybee, Butterfly, and Dragonfly. I don't know what Dragonfly is for yet, but Butterfly is basically your wind data or your wind simulation. I believe they covered it. If they didn't, then just double check and look into this one. We are going to have a workshop in studio for CFD and wind analysis on the 16th. So even if we didn't go over Butterfly yet, I don't remember, we will have an open foam and CFD workshop on the 16th. And that'll help you with your second assignment. Let me just copy this in the chat for you guys just so you have it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I want you guys to do is go ahead and open up, if you go to your workshop files, not this one, for a different class. Into workshop, let's say 60. Okay, so if you open up your site model file, that's going to be the first one we're going to start with. Make sure you're opening up in Rhino 7. And what you're going to see is basically an empty file. If you go to your layers on the right, you're going to see some layers here. If you type in show, you're going to see that I have some site model that was basically hidden inside of this file. This is the site we're going to be using for the workshop today. And this site is a site on Miami Beach, just to give you guys a reference of where we're working, in front of the Bass Museum. Is it Bass or Bass Museum? Bass Museum.
Professor, could you resend the link because I reconnected and it was lost in the chat?
No problem. Here's the link here. Okay, so the site we are looking at is right here. So in front of the Bass Museum in Collins Park, there's this parking lot here. So there's some tall buildings around which might affect the solar radiation. And you have the ocean to the east and the rest of Miami to the west. So this is basically the site that we're working with. So the way that I got this data was through our workshop and workflow that we used in Meerkat in our previous workshop, right? So if you go ahead and launch Grasshopper and go ahead and open up your other, your site model 009 Grasshopper. And while that's loading, I would say let's just go ahead and select everything in the viewport and just hide it again, because I want to just show you what you see in Grasshopper and just quickly walk through the script. So what you're seeing in this script, this is exactly what we did for the first workshop, right? Where we got our Meerkat data. Hopefully it's linked for you guys and you're able to see the data. If it's not, I'll provide it later on Canvas. I tried to internalize the data, so it should be working, but it might not always work. But we'll double check that. So this is basically what we did last workshop. And what you're seeing is the Meerkat information and the GIS information coming into our viewport. Now, by default, the center of this geometry is centered inside of this, the zero origin of our viewport or of our window here, right? And we did that by basically using our move, our vector to point, and using a move command to move all of our geometry to the center of Rhino. So we're going to use this kind of center point of our data as our survey point. So typically when you're working on a project in a firm, you're going to have the surveyor that's going to basically take a survey of the site, and they'll have their own kind of reference point for that survey point, which you'll then use as your coordinates for all of your models inside of BIM. In our case, we don't have a survey, so we're just going to use the center point of this model. The first thing you're going to see is that on the right here, what I basically did is I internalized all of the data. So here you have your, these is your land use file. This is your edge of pavement. This is the small buildings, and this is the large buildings. And this is what it looks like before we actually move it. But the first thing you want to do for your site is you want to move your site to be project oriented in the center and aligned with the project north. So if you notice, if this is our site here, right, our project center, we want to make a project base point at the lower left corner of the project. The site center is here, and then this is going to be our survey point. So in order to bring this into Revit correctly for us to work in a streamlined way, what you first want to do is you want to center your site to be project centered, meaning we want this site center to be in the center location here. And we also want to have it rotated so that the angles of the project, meaning that if like we were to draw a site here, right? Sorry, this is supposed to be a rectangle. If we were to have our site here, this would be our project north, right? Facing that direction, aligned with the axis of our project. And this is going to be our true north. So currently our project is set up for true north because we're just taking the data strictly from GIS, but we want to basically move it and rotate it so that it's project north. And if you type show, that's exactly what we did here. So all I did to do that was I took our project center point. So you can see here we have our project center point. We have our project base point, which is going to be where the site, where the buildable part of the site starts in the lower left corner. And then our survey point, which is the center of our data. And I just used the same command that we did before, vector to point. And essentially what that does is if you hide all of this and turn all of these guys on, that's just going to move our geometry from that position so that our project now is centered in the middle of our Rhino file. So this is really important. You'll see why when we get into Revit. So let's actually go ahead and fire up Revit. Let's open up Revit 2021. And I do have a quick note for you guys in case you're missing it. So I'm not sure if this is for everyone, but for me, when I opened up Revit 2021 on this computer, I have a new computer that I'm working on, so I had to reinstall all the software. And when I went to go open up, you guys can just open up a new file, an architectural template, Imperial Architectural is fine. When I went to go look for Insight 360, it was missing. So if that happens to you, maybe just double check really quick. It should be under the Analyze tab. You should see lighting and solar. For me, it was missing, so I had to go and download it. Do you guys have this in your Revit 2021? Does anybody not have it?
I didn't have it in mind.
You do or do not?
Do not.
Okay, so let's go over how to get that. So in order to get that file, if you go to Autodesk and just sign in, and if you come over to your little icon over here and you have your products and services, you're going to scroll down to where you see Revit. And if you open up the little drop down here, there's a place where it says updates and add-ons. So you can go ahead and click updates and add-ons. Unfortunately, it's not that intuitive. It gives you like a million different options. So what you can do is click on add filters and just select your operating system. Mine is Windows. I think they're all Windows because it looks like there's none for Mac. Make sure you select 2021 and then the language that you prefer and hit apply. And you should get a more condensed list. So I went from like 60 to 15, which is good. And what you want to download is the solar analysis for Revit, the browser download, and then also the lighting analysis for Revit browser download. So you'll download both of those, and it's going to give you this file here, which is like, it's like an MSI file. Go to downloads. This RLIT and RSOL 2021 MSI file. So go ahead and install both of those. Make sure you close Revit before installing them. Otherwise, you might get an error. So just shut down Revit and then install them, and then reopen up Revit. So go ahead and do that really quick. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to go over the workflow from getting your site into Revit from Rhino. So after you move your site right to the center, what you want to do is you want to basically rotate it so that the project is facing north. So in this case, I first moved it. So if I go ahead and hide this and I press, if I type show, you can see that this site here is project north, meaning that this is my project, my site boundary. My site center is centered at the 0, 0. I still have my survey point and my project base point, and I rotated the whole site so that the project is project north. Now, if you open up this file, you're going to see a couple of layers on the side. So I would recommend for all of your projects, you have some kind of mechanism for keeping these important locations in your file. So your project center, your project north, your project base point, your true north, and your survey point, right? So if you zoom into the center here, you're going to see that we have 2 lines. So the red line represents your project north, which should be oriented with the main axis of your site, especially if you're working with a grid or a very rectangular or orthogonal project. This is really important. If you have a very complex curved project, then maybe it's not as necessary, but still probably good for rationalization. And then you have your true north. So what you're seeing here is this line here represents the true north of the site. So if I was to select everything and rotate, and the way that you rotate is you click on the center, and you can just click on the true north and move that to the y-axis. This basically represents the true north of your site, and this is how your data comes in via GIS, right? So if we turn this on, this is exactly the same thing. So all I did was I baked all the layers, and then I just rotated it so that it's project north. Once you do that, you should go ahead and mirror your true north. So I just took this and I did mirror, right, along this axis to get this line. So this line is going to basically represent the angle of rotation between our true north and our project north. And we're going to use that in Revit to basically make sure that our Revit file, our site file, is matching our true north inside of our Rhino file. So we have both of those. One thing I would recommend is that once you have your site set up, I would recommend making your site a completely separate file. Many of you are going to have very heavy site models, and it doesn't make sense to have all of your site model directly embedded in the same file as the project file that you're working on, because your project file over time will also get very heavy. So a good practice, what you guys can do, if you go ahead and open up the workshop file called projects. Sorry, I lost my folder here. It's called project base. Go ahead and open that one as well. And what you're going to see is it's basically the extracted site from this file. So I went ahead and I just extracted our site boundary, our project base point, our site center, and the survey point. That's all the information that I need, right? So that I have my separate project file here. And this is where we're going to be doing our modeling for this workshop. If you want to bring in your site for reference, what I would recommend is using the insert command. So if we type insert, we get this option to insert a block instance or a group. I don't know, I think block instance might be lighter. I don't know, you guys can correct me if anyone knows, but I'm not completely sure. I bring it in as a group because I just think it's easier to work with than blocks. But again, it might be lighter as a block. You guys can double check on that. So I'm just going to select as group. And if you go to this folder here, you can go ahead and select your site file. So if you open up your workshop files and select your site model, and we hit OK, it's going to give you your site model as this block or as this group, and it asks you to place it. You can just go ahead and press 0 and enter, and that will essentially, well, that did not actually work. Let's see, let me try this again. Might be an issue because I already have the project opened. Oh, okay, so this window didn't come up the first time. Typically, you get both of these windows. So the first one is, I put it as linked. I would imagine linked is going to be lighter than embedded, but again, I don't know for sure. So I select that, I set it as group and hit OK. And then it should give me my site. And you can place it in the center by typing 0 and enter. I don't know why it's going off into space. So let me just try this one more time. Maybe I will vertex maybe. Okay. Maybe I'll just place it manually. Site model, linked, okay. As group, okay. And then maybe I'll just go in the top view and place it manually. You just basically want to put it in the center. Oh, that's so weird. I don't know why it's doing that. Maybe because I have something turned off here. Okay. I don't know if you guys are having the same issue as me. If you are, maybe let's try enclosing the site model and then see if we can import this model or insert this model without any errors. And if anyone knows what I'm missing, feel free to let me know. But this worked literally 20 minutes ago. Yeah, no, it's like going off into space or something. I'm not sure what the issue is here, but there is the site already in this file if you want to use it as a reference. You just have to press type in show and it'll show up there. But basically what you want to do is have this. Oh, you know what it might have been? I might have already had it in this file as a group. So maybe that's why it's not letting me overwrite it. Let's just double check. If I delete this and I do insert, just to have clarity on why maybe that might be happening as a group. And then if we press, no, it just has an issue. It might just be my my Rhino window. But at any rate, you guys have the site in here already as a inside of this file as a group. But basically what you want to do is use that insert command. That way you can have a much lighter file and you can have a more complex 3D model for your project. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide the site for now and just work here. And this is where I'm going to be doing my massing for the workshop. But you want to have two separate files, one for your project and one for your site. And now if we go ahead with, we can close both of these because we're going to open them in Revit. Hopefully by now you guys have your Insight installed. And what we're going to do is we are going to first go over to our add-ins and Rhino. And the first thing we're going to do is import our site. So if you go to import and navigate to your site model, it'll probably take a while to, there's no open view that shows searching through closed views. Okay, so maybe we want to open it first. Again, this is a new workflow for me, so bear with me if I'm a little bit slow on some of these things. So let's go ahead and open up our Rhino first. And then if we go ahead and open our workshop site model here, supposedly this is going to be faster. Make sure you turn on everything, just type show so that it's visible so we can see our site. And you notice that it's oriented to project north and project center. And that's important because you notice that we have these elevation markers inside of Revit. And if you go into 3D, we also have these, what is that? I don't know what that is. That might be something from Rhino. Okay, so you notice we have these levels here. And these are going to be centered to the project center. So what we want to do, if we hit preview, you're going to see a preview of the site, how it's going to come in. And that looks like exactly what we want. All right, so that's good. So let's go ahead and just hit import. Select your site model. And we should now have wow, this is giving me all kinds of issues. I'm not even sure why. Under masking in site, make sure your show mask settings are on. That's going to be important later. And maybe if we go into our site view, yeah, this is not importing correctly. Okay, so there's an issue with the file. I'm not sure what the issue is. I'm going to use the one that I did earlier. And what I'll do is I'll just upload the new files for you guys. I'm not sure if you guys are having the same issues that I am, but if you go into, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import another version of this called site model 008. And hopefully this will work. It looks like it's working because it's taking a little bit longer. Yeah, there's something wrong with the Rhino file, I believe. We'll have to double check that. Okay, perfect. So we get our site model in here, and in this version, I already did the rotation, and I already set up the true north. So this one's already rotated in the way that we want it, which is basically project north. So our elevation markers match, and if we go into 3D, we can see that our levels are matching the site, which is good. So that's why it's important to basically set up your project center and project north in Rhino at first. So when you bring in your site, it's going to be working properly in Revit. So if you take a look at the template, the first part of the assignment is to import your site into Revit. And then the second part is to set up your site location. So let's go ahead and do that. But maybe even before we do that, we probably want to set up our true north and our survey point. So we can go ahead and do that. So unfortunately, because the other file didn't work, this one's already set up probably correctly. So if you click in your site view, if you click off into white space, you can see that right now the orientation is set to project north. But we can switch this to true north and nothing happens, right? So our model is basically facing project north and the true north is not set up. So to set that up, what you can do is you can go under manage. So under manage, you have your location settings, which we'll do in a second, and then you have this position. So if we click position, you're going to get an option for rotate to true north. This will only highlight, I believe, if you have the orientation set to true north, right? So make sure your orientation is set to true north, and then we're going to hit rotate true north. And we're just going to use that angle that we put in Rhino before to just rotate this to that angle. That way, if we wanted to, when we run our solar analysis, we're going to run it in true north. If you run it in project north, you might get unexpected results. So now we can toggle between our project north and our true north. So hopefully that makes sense why this is important, right? When we're modeling, we probably want to model in project north because it'll be easier to line things up on our project. All of our drawings from our elevations will be lined up and our levels are going to be lined up correctly. But when we switch into maybe doing our analysis mode, we probably want to be working in true north because this is how the sun is going to actually work on our site with the true north set correctly. So hopefully that makes sense why that's important. And this is how we're going to be operating. Again, I'll put these files in the, I'll send you guys these files later so you can use this one. I'm not sure if anyone's having issues with the ones that I sent you guys, but if you are, I will send you the updated version. For some reason, the Rhino file that I sent you is either corrupted or there's something in there that's a little bit off. Okay, so the first thing we did is we set our true north. If you wanted to move, let's say, the survey point and the project base point inside of Revit to match your survey and project base point inside of Rhino, which I would recommend, you can't see it by default. I mean, you should see it in the site. Okay, so we're in level 1. If you go to your site level, you're going to see that you have these two little icons here inside of Revit. So one is the project base point, and this triangle one is the survey point. So we can go ahead and move our project base point to our project base point, which is this lower left corner. Notice that the locations basically change as you move it. And these values are dependent on our survey point. So let's put our survey point where our data was originally set to, which is this point here. So that way, if we jump between Rhino and Revit and we bring in new data that's linked to maybe our GIS data, it'll come in the right place. So make sure you set up your survey point and your project base point so that you avoid any errors with overlapping information. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to set up our location for the project. So in order to do that, yeah, question?
Yeah, when you move the survey point, if I understand correctly, towards let's say in between the cities at the plan view, did you have a snap-on or did you just click and drag?
I just clicked and drag. So one thing that's interesting that I noticed in Revit 2020, when you click on the project base point, you have an option to clip or unclip the project base point. And if you notice on the survey point, you have an option to clip or unclip the survey point. So best practices is when you're moving the survey point, you don't unclip it. Like you don't unclip it. You always leave it clipped when you move it. That way your locations for the survey point are always 0, 0, 0. And the project base point is dependent on that. Now in Revit 2021, they don't have the clip for some reason. So I'm not sure if maybe they got rid of it. So previously what you would do is you would unclip it and then move it. But in this case, we don't have that option. So I just moved it. But yeah, all I did was I just dragged it. I didn't have to do anything else. So you just click and then drag.
What does clip mean?
So clip basically kind of it's different. It's reversed for the project base point and the survey point. I'll send you guys a link to this. Let's see if I have this open. No, I don't. There's a good explanation for shared coordinates. It's this one. So I'll send you guys the link to this.
Just a really quick announcement before we get going. Our popular basic.
They basically go over how to set up shared coordinates properly. So let's say your site has multiple, your project has multiple buildings on it. They show you how to set up a site model correctly. And then you can have all of your buildings as separate projects or separate files and then link them accurately. So basically the reason why we're setting up this survey point and the project base point is that way you can overlay not only GIS data and other layers into your project accurately, but if you had multiple buildings on your site, you could also do that as well. I'll put this in the resources for the course, but I'll drop this in the chat in the meantime for you guys if anyone wants to take a look at it. But this is basically the workflow that we're doing. And if you're working in a firm, this is typically, this is going to be important to have this set up correctly. And every office might do it a little bit differently. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so moving forward, we want to set up our location information, right? So let's go to under the Manage tab, Location. We want to go to our project address, and this one is in Miami Beach. So let's just go ahead and search Miami Beach. Now this window drives me crazy because if you notice, I'm still stuck in Boston, even though I typed in Miami Beach, and it doesn't always update for me. So what I had to do is when you type it in, you get this little pop-up, and I just clicked on it, and then it finally brought me to the right location. So I'm not sure if that's something that's happening to you guys as well. If so, just go ahead and do the same thing that I did, and just pick the weather station that's closest to your site, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and pick this weather station since my site is up here. That's the closest one. And you could probably, I think you can move this home icon. This home icon represents the project's address. So if you wanted to, you could go ahead and it says you can enter an address or drag to move it. So I can go ahead and place it where my site is. I'm not sure if that's going to make any direct changes to our analysis, but basically the weather data comes from this, whatever weather station you select. So just make sure you select the closest one. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now in doing so, we should get the weather for that site, right? So if you click on weather, you're going to see we have all the dry bulb information, the wet bulb information, and the mean daily range. Now, this is information that you guys can get in Ladybug tools, which I would think is better because they actually give you the graphic outputs for this, which I think is much more, it gives you a lot more information than just the dry bulb and wet bulb. So I would recommend doing that. Another thing that you could probably do is we could maybe use a generic building form. So if you guys go through your information here, it asks you to get the climate data and the macro climate data. So understanding what climate zone we're in. So we're in this blue climate zone here, which is a hot and humid climate zone. And in order to get these charts here, I got these from Green Building Studio. You could also probably get them from the Ladybug tools. So I'm going to show you how to do it with Green Building Studio. But if you guys want, I would imagine the Ladybug tools are going to be more efficient and easier. But we'll go over that in a second. So these are basically part of your research, understanding like the generic building form for your climate. But we're going to go over how to do the conceptual massing and basically bring it into Revit from Rhino. So the first thing I want to do now that I have my site set up correctly, I'm switching this to shaded mode so I can see a little bit better. And we can jump back into Rhino and we can go ahead to open up our project file. So this is our site file, but I want to go ahead and click open and open up our project base. That way I just have the site here. So it's light and I can work on the fly. I already went ahead and modeled a few options for you guys. Again, you guys are going to do your own options. There's option 1 here, which is kind of like this C shape option, right? There's option 2 here, which is this O shape, and option 3, which is more of this kind of rectangular shape. Now, the reason why I'm using these kind of really curved geometries is because, one, because I think your projects are all going to come out very unique and interesting in form and shape, depending on the program requirements and the urban surroundings your project. It's really easy to maybe assume how a building will perform if it's just a box, right? So if it's just a box, you could easily say, okay, well, this is like the north side, so I should probably put my windows here. It's in a hot and humid climate, so maybe I want to rotate the long axis east to west. So it's really easy to understand how to optimize this if it's just a box. But if you have a really complex geometry like this, it's not always so obvious how we should orient the building or make modifications to it because of the form. So that's why this assignment, I think, is important for the conceptual stage of your projects. Your projects are all going to have different forms based off of the site. So for example, for this option, since I have my main views are facing the east, right? I'm probably going to be setting up a lot of my windows to face the ocean on this site. So I'll probably have a lot of solar radiation and direct solar radiation on the windows on this project if I set up my windows facing east, especially in the morning and early morning times. So that's something that I want to basically mitigate for this project. So this is why it's important to maybe do this early on in the conceptual design stage. That way you understand how your building is performing and you can make the modifications early on. Okay, so I have 3 options here you guys can use in order to import, and I'm just going to show you guys how you can import this. So let's go ahead and open up Grasshopper. And inside of our, we go to open document. Inside of our workshop files, there's this import Rhino mass to Revit. You can go ahead and open that. Now we saw from our Rhino to Revit inside workshop earlier, it's really easy to just import stuff directly into Rhino. The issue though is that if we were to just import a file directly from Rhino into Revit, we don't get the options that we're expecting, right? Sorry, these windows are a little bit of a mess. Let me see if I can make this easier for us to see. So we'll put this one like this. Grasshopper can be here. Okay, so I think this works. Okay, cool. So now we can see everything. So for example, if I had my box again, and I was to bring this into into Rhino, this won't come in as a mass, it'll come in as a generic model. So we wouldn't be able to necessarily run the proper calculations that we'd want to using the conceptual mass settings. So we need to set up this as a conceptual mass from Rhino and Grasshopper with Rhino inside into Revit in order for it to accurately work. So in order to do that, you have these nodes here. This is the workaround that I found. There's probably other options, so I encourage you guys to maybe explore what those options might be. But essentially, all I did was using this new family component, I created a new family for each of our masses. And the reason why I'm doing this is because with this option, you can select the category for the mass to be a mass, right? Instead of generic model, you can set it as a mass, a conceptual mass. And I just made 3 of them for 3 of our options here. And it takes a couple parameters. The override family will just override every time you import it. It'll, if there's an option 1, it'll override the option 1. The name obviously is just the name of the family that you're bringing in. The category is going to be set to mass, and then our geometry is basically our geometry inside of Rhino. So you can use your Rhino file to create your options. So I have option 1, 2, and 3 here. And those are basically just linked to each of these geometries, right? And then if you want to bring those into your file here, what you can do is just turn on this node here. So this node is basically an add component by location. And all it's going to do is add a component. So we have our family component, and we're going to add that family component by using this node, which takes a location. So our location here is just our site center. So if we turn these on, if you turn it on, it's going to automatically load it. So if I enable it, you can see that automatically my massing came in. Now the beauty of this is that because we use this workflow, if you notice at the top here, when I click on my mass, I get this option for edit family and mass floors. So if you just bring in a regular geometry and set it to be a mass, you don't get this mass floors option, which is really a pain, especially if you want to run analysis and lighting analysis. This is something that you're going to need. So what you can do is use this these nodes here inside of Grasshopper to basically add this as a family so that it's set up as a mass, and then we can use the mass floors command. It keeps trying to put it at level 2. Make sure you put it at level 1. That way it's set to the ground floor. And then if we click on our mass here, we can go ahead and hit mass floors, level 1, level 2. And now we're getting our floors for our massing, right? So we're going to do the same thing for the other ones. So let's go into Grasshopper here, and let's just go ahead and enable this one here and enable this one here. And once they're all brought in, it should look like this, right? So we have them all over on top of each other. This is probably not going to be ideal, and you don't want to keep, turning them on and hiding one, right, and then unhiding it. That's going to be kind of a pain. So what you can do is you can set up design options. So if you go into massing and site, if you go into manage, you have this option for design options. If you click on design options, what you're going to get is this window here, and you can create an option set. So that way we can switch between all of our different options. So I have this option set 1, and by default, it makes a primary option. And if you click down here where it says option, you can add a couple more. So I typically will do 4, right? The first one, I'll just rename and call it empty. So I want to have an option where there's nothing on the site and it's just empty. And then this one I'll make option 1. This one I will make option 2. And this one I'll make option 3. So to basically place these geometries in those options, right now we're in the main model, right? But we have our options here. So we can go to, let's say, from our main model, if we select our first option, which is this option 1 mass, and we go over here and we do cut to clipboard. You have to make sure you unpin it, otherwise it won't let you cut to clipboard. We can switch from our main model view to our option 1 view. And now we can go ahead and paste a line to the same place. So now basically our option 1 is inside of our option 1 design option, right? And you have this option, you can select your active design option here or at the bottom here. So I could also select it here. And if I jump back in the main model, you'll see that option 1 is gone. So that's good. It's only living inside of our option 1 design option view. So let's do the same thing for option 2. Let's unclip it. Let's cut it. Let's switch to option 2. And we are going to go to modify and paste a line to the same place. And then let's go ahead back to our main model. Select option 3, unpin it, cut it, switch to option 3. And then we're going to align to the same place. And now if we did this correctly, we should be able to go back to our main model and see nothing there. And if we want to switch to our option 1, we have option 1, switch to option 2, we have option 2, option 3, we have option 3. And I think this just makes it a lot easier to work. So let's go ahead and do our masked floors for all of our options. So I'm going to select option 2 and do masked floors. So we get our floors here, right? And then I'll switch to option 3 and do masked floors. And this one, for some reason, it doesn't like level 1, probably because the floor slab is too small. So I'm just going to only do level 2. And now I have my masked floors for each of my options, right? So the next thing you want to do, let's see, we covered how to make the massing. If you guys have questions on how I generated this massing, I basically just made it inside of Rhino using sweeps. So if you come into here and you, let's just turn off Grasshopper for a second so we can see. I'm just going to hide all of these previews. If you open up, let's say, option 2, for example, and if you hide the geometry, I basically just made a rail and then a series of frames. And then I just did a sweep 1, which allows you to select the rail. And then you can select the cross sections. And then you hit enter. You should align these loft points to make sure that they're on the same point of your profile curves. Otherwise, you might get some unexpected results. And then you just hit enter, right? And you get this really kind of complex geometry. So I basically did that for option 2. Option 1 is just a basic loft, right? With some offsets. And then option 3 is a horizontal loft, right? Between all of these. So one is a sweep, the other 2 are lofts. So if you guys have questions on how I made that, that's basically how I did it. And then I just capped the geometry, right? Okay. So coming back to here, so we went over how to generate your massing. So let's go over how to set up Insight. So running Insight, now that we have our massing, we can just go under our Analyze tab. And now we should have lighting and solar since we installed it. Hopefully you guys have it now. If you don't, we can troubleshoot this later. We can go into our solar options here. And we can select study type as custom. We're going to use user selection. That way we can select only the faces we want to basically study. It's going to do some thinking. It gives you this warning. You can just go ahead and uncheck this. And then it's asking you to basically select the faces that you want to include in the study. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. And I'm going to make sure at the top left, you hit this little finish button. It's kind of hard to see and it's weird that it's all the way over here, but you need to hit this finish button in order for it to calculate. And now if we drop down this little arrow here, you want to make sure that your settings are set to cumulative insolation. This is like the all of the solar radiation for that set time period. We're going to be using a whole year. And then the style, you can set up the styles. I'm just going to leave it as default, but we can set up the styles by clicking on these 3 buttons. And then you guys can go ahead and duplicate this solar analysis default. So we can go ahead and do duplicate. I'm just going to leave it as the same, and I'm going to call it custom. And then if you go to the legend, you can change the colors. The default colors are yellow, green, and blue. I think that it's easier to read if you make the highest value red, the medium value yellow, and the lowest one blue. You guys can choose whatever colors you want, but the idea is to make this as readable as possible for anyone that's looking at it, right? Okay, so I'm gonna hit okay, or apply and okay. And let's just make sure that this is set up to custom. It doesn't show here. So did I not save it? Okay, I might have to close it again and open it. Let's see. Close it, open it again. Okay, it's a little bit weird. You have to close, once you make a new style, you have to close the solar analysis window and open it again to get it to show up. It's a little bit weird, but that's what you have to do. And you can set this to BTUs or kilowatt hours per meter squared. BTUs is typically used in the US. Kilowatt hours per meter squared is more international. So I'm going to leave it on kilowatt hours per meter squared. And before we do this, we have to set up our occupancy type and our sun settings, right? So before we get into this, if we were just to run this right now, what would happen is it would give you an output, but it's not necessarily accurate because we haven't set up our sun settings or our occupancy settings. It'll give you a graphic, right? So we can see obviously that the roof is getting a ton of solar radiation, whereas the lower parts underneath is pretty well shaded and protected. It gives you this legend here, so you can see what the red represents in regards to how much solar radiation it absorbs. So we're going to basically be using this as kind of our screenshot. So you can drag over your legend somewhere like this, and then take your screenshot for the assignment like this, right? But in order to make sure that we're getting accurate data, we have our project location set up correctly. But if you notice our, it's doing I think by default, it's doing a whole year, right? But we want to make sure that we're setting up those settings correctly. So one way that we can do that is under our sun settings here. If you go to this little icon, you have sun settings. Make sure you save your project. I believe in the template, they ask you to set up the sun for, let's see. Maybe we're missing that one. We might be missing that data. Okay, here. So we want to do a 1-year solar study, multi-day. And in this case, we could probably set it to sunrise and sunset. The template, this was, Professor Spiegelhalter asked us to put it from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but maybe we should just go ahead and follow those. And we can ask him later why that is. We can double check. Otherwise, you can always just hit the sunrise to sunset, and that will work just fine. But for now, let's go ahead and switch this to 6 to 11. So in our settings, we're going to go to multi-day. And I'm going to uncheck sunrise to sunset, and I'm going to put this from 6 a.m. to 11. And we're going to do a 1-year solar study and hit apply. Okay. And when we rerun our solar analysis, now this is going to basically take that sun data into account. Now, before we do that, if you want to delete your solar analysis, you can just click on the option and hit delete, and it'll go away. Maybe we want to check our just how our shadows are working on the site. You can set up your sun settings using like a single day or a still option. And you can select summer solstice, for example, and hit apply. Okay, and then if you go ahead and turn on your shadows, so shadows on, you can see that we're getting the shadows from the site, right? Which are basically more or less straight down for the summer solstice. Now, if we switch maybe to our winter solstice, you can see that we're getting our shadows from this building actually does impact our site quite a lot during the winter. So you can check the shadows just using the shadows directly in Revit with this option. And this will go into your analysis for your project according to understanding how, for example, how does light basically affect your building on your site, right? To get the sun chart like you see here, what you can do is you can select sun path on. And if you zoom out, what it's going to do, it's going to take everything in the viewport and basically give you this sun path, right? Now, I'm not sure why it's a little bit glitchy, but if you wanted to just have it over your specific model, like you see in the images, you can just isolate your model. So if we go ahead and click on our model and we do isolate category here, and then we go ahead and turn our sun path on. Okay, so it doesn't work with isolate. So let's turn that off. So what you're gonna have to do is go to your main model design option and hide the site. And then let's go back to our option 3. And then if you go ahead and turn sun path off and turn sun path on, you can see now we have it basically set up for directly on our building. So if you wanted to do that, you can do that. So you can basically get the path directly over your building, so you can have a graphic similar to this. Okay, what else? So we covered shadows, we covered sun settings. Oh, the occupancy type. This one's also important. So to set up the proper occupancy type, let me just bring our site back really quick. Switch back to main model, unhide and view. Option 3. Okay, so in order to bring our, I'm gonna turn off the sun path for now. In order to bring our occupancy settings up, we can go into our, I think it's the Analyze tab. Under Analyze, you have your energy settings. Yeah, so this is what we're going to be looking at, right? And if you look at your template, it goes over those settings and what you need to set them to. So you guys can go through and set those up. Okay, I'm in the wrong spot. So this is your building space and type settings, which looks like you need to go to Analyze, Reports, and Schedules. So it's Analyze. If you guys see it, let me know.
Yeah, on your right, next.
You
Left,
might have to click the reports and schedules and the drop down at the bottom.
Right
That's
there.
right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we click on this little arrow, then it gives us our options here. So you guys can set those options up according to what your occupancy type is. All of you are going to have different occupancy based off of your studio projects. So make sure you're selecting the proper one. I'm just going to hit Office for now. And I'm not going to set this up according to the template. You guys can go through and make sure you're checking the right settings. But we have our occupancy set up. We have our location, our sun path all set up. So now when we run our solar analysis, we are going to get hopefully accurate results, right? So we can go ahead and hit solar. You might have to reselect this selection. I'm just gonna hit update, so hopefully we don't. And we get our radiation study. Now, obviously, if we were to put windows on this top surface, it would have a lot of radiation, right? So you guys might want to jump back into Rhino at this point and start designing maybe some shading devices, right? So if we were to come to this file here, and let's say if we were to duplicate this edge here, and then maybe we wanted to extrude that edge in this direction to create some kind of like, direction, top view. To create some kind of shading device, you could go ahead and do so. We probably need to give it a thickness, right? So we can offset this surface, offset surface. And I'm just going to do a distance of 2 inches. Right, this is a really bad example. You guys will come up with much better quality examples based off of your studio projects, but I just want to show you how you could then bring this in. So we can go ahead and copy exactly what we did here, right? Before you do that, you might want to maybe just turn off this end node because it'll try to bring it in automatically. We can just copy this logic here, drag it down, and let's give it a new name. Let's say shade 1, right? And then let's clear the geometry, and let's add a new geometry, which is going to be our shade here, right? And now let's go ahead and disconnect this line and enable this. The reason why I'm being so cautious with this is that it automatically sends it straight to Revit, and sometimes it gives you some weird outputs. If you already have, let's say, data being input here, and then you're inputting new data, sometimes it tries to keep both inside of the component. So I just disconnect everything just to make sure that it refreshes properly. And now we can drag this in. In this case, it is set to level 2, so that's fine. And now, hopefully, if we did that correctly, it should come into our site. And we have some issues with it lining up. So if we click on it, you can see that by default, although it was set to level 2, you have this offset from host to -15. Just go ahead and make that 0, and hopefully it'll move up.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah, so now we have it in the right spot, right? Yeah, question?
So when you did that script, what's the difference between doing it that way and then right there where you have where it says generic models, like I was playing with it, changing it to like walls, face, or anything else, and then clicking big selected?
So that's the right way to do it, right? Now, that's like if you already are using, let's say, building elements, but maybe you don't know if this shade is going to be like a glass facade or if it's going to be maybe like a concrete wall. So if you're just working with conceptual masses, I haven't found a nice workflow from Rhino Inside into Revit with just conceptual masses. So this is the workaround. It seems like Rhino Inside kind of forces you to pick a building element straight from Revit, and they don't let you work directly with masses. If anyone figures this out, let me know. But in the meantime, this is the workaround that I found. So that way, if you don't want to, maybe you don't know what this like surface, for example, is going to be. Like maybe you don't know it's going to be a concrete or a curtain wall system, then you probably don't want to define it from Revit or from Rhino into Revit already. You might just want to use it as a conceptual mass. So if that's the case, then which most likely if this assignment, that's what you're going to be doing, then I would recommend using this workflow. Okay. Now, if at any point you want to see which models you have inside of, which masses you have inside of your file. Because sometimes, again, these overwrite each other, which is a little bit confusing. You can use this option at the bottom here. And this basically shows you which masses are currently in your project. So we have option 1, 2, 3, and shape. And to refresh it, you can just redrag it over, and that'll kind of like refresh it. Sometimes it gets a little bit stuck. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'll try to just finish up the last part. Yes, questions after class, that is fine. Okay, so we brought this in, and you guys can basically, so you're gonna have to define according to your template, which part of the project. So first define which option you're gonna select for your studio. And then you're gonna basically show us where you're gonna be putting the windows. So, and I don't have time to show you guys that now, but basically in this example, I would probably be putting the windows on this facade here, right? And adding this shading device over those windows to just ensure that it's not getting direct solar radiation. But it's the same process. What you want to do is you want to define your windows inside of Rhino. So if I have my shading device, I'm just going to hide this and hide this. Let's say I wanted to make this some kind of facade, this panel here, or this surface here. What you want to do is you want to basically extract a surface from your geometry and make sure the copy option is set to yes. That way it doesn't delete that from your form, right? So now we have this copy of this extracted surface. I typically move it a little bit off. So maybe what I can do is I can offset this surface, because we don't want it to be directly on the existing mesh, because they might overlap and give us issues with our insight. So you can do offset surface, and I'll just give it a really small distance of like, I don't know, 1 inch, and then hit enter. And then you can go ahead and explode this and just control click the top layer and delete everything else. That way we have this really small copy of that face, 1 inch off of the surface, that we can then represent as our windows. And there's a really cool plugin called Lunchbox. If you guys want to maybe do some more complex openings in your project, you guys can download this plugin. It has these couple of different types of ways of dividing surfaces. This one is hexagons, right? So if I select one surface, it'll go ahead and make this kind of hexagons on that surface. This surface isn't probably a good example. It's looking really messy, probably because it's very elongated. So maybe what I can do is extract iso curve. Maybe I can divide it. Direction V. So maybe if I just take this part here and let's just split it. Doesn't seem to have split. Doesn't want to split for some reason. But let me just show you on a different surface for now. If you did have a surface, right, and you use this plugin, what it'll do is it'll automatically make those that kind of like paneling system for you. So there's a bunch of built-in ones with this plugin Lunchbox, so that might be helpful. And then if you wanted to maybe use these as windows for your facade, right, you could maybe extrude these. Let's just give it a Z direction. And then maybe we want to cap these. And then you can basically send those over. So if I bake this now. So let's say these are representing your windows. Obviously, they're a bit too thick. You could send this over as your windows as a mass to Revit using this workflow, right? So we would just go ahead and copy this. And we could just name this now Windows 1. And we can set now this set. So these are multiple geometries. So you have to you would have to like merge them. So we could use maybe a Boolean, let's see, Boolean union potentially. So if you use Boolean union, now get rid of the in-between values so that it's like, this is one mass, this is one mass, this is one mass. So we could say, okay, this is window 1. We can clear the values here and then set one geometry. And then it should show up once we enable this. So let me disconnect and enable this. And then turn this on. That should bring it in, right? So it's right here. And then if you wanted to run, obviously you want to do this on your building, but if you wanted to run an analysis for your windows now with this window, you could go over to your Analyze tab, Solar, and instead of clicking on the mask for the building, you could click on the mask for the windows. So we can just go ahead and select this user select here, select our mask, hit finish, and then once it loads, update, right? And now we're getting the solar radiation for what would be potentially our windows, right? So we can see obviously on this side where it's really red, we would have to put some kind of shading device. On this side, maybe where it doesn't get as much, maybe we don't need as much of a shading device to protect that. So that's effectively how you would do these next steps, right? So here I'm defining my windows. I'm importing them into Revit. I'm running a radiation on those windows. So I see I have an issue in the ones at the top right. So I'm adding shades to basically mitigate those issues from solar radiation. And the last part is diagramming that in section and then switching the climate zone and explaining what is the difference between a different climate zone. So I think this is pretty clear. If you guys are confused on this, we can go over this a little bit more on Thursday, but definitely give it a shot so that way you guys can have questions ready. Don't wait last minute to do this. It's going to benefit you in your studios as well. So it's in your best interest to maybe start early. That way you can use it for your studio projects. So hopefully this helped you guys see a different workflow. Again, you can use Butterfly or Ladybug tools instead of this workflow, but this is basically the workflow inside of Insight 360 and Revit. I know we went over time, but that's okay. This is recorded for you guys. So again, any questions, just let us know and we can talk more about this on Thursday.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
I have a question. If let's say, because my group for studio, we created the mask in Rhino and we're trying to put it, do Revit into Rhino, but it's not reading the floor levels. Is there a way that we can, do we have to do that through Grasshopper or do we have to do that through Revit?
Yeah, so I had the same issue. That's why I did this workflow here. So give this script a try. So with this family component, that basically allows you to put the floors inside of Revit, right? Because before it wasn't letting me put the floors if I just brought it directly as a mass. So I had to use this family component, right, inside of Grasshopper in order to make it work. So you guys have this file. So try that. That's the workaround I found. There might be other ones, but again, this is a new workflow, so I'm not completely sure what's out there. But this was the best one that I found online. That way, at least you can get the mass floors and you can work with it as a mass in Revit as you would need to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, guys? Okay, Miriam, I saw your message. I have another class right now, so I have to jump over. But if you want, I have a break. I have a break after that class around, let's see if it's 10:30 to 9:30. around 11. If you want to talk then, we can talk then. We can set that up through Discord.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
All right, guys. Everyone else, I'll talk to you guys on Thursday. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you.